There was a desert slightly to the southwest of the continent's center. It was called the Dolar Desert, or perhaps the Gavorsa Desert, according to the great empire that had once stood here. Well, it was quite an expansive desert. For certain reasons it received rainfall, and so various races and monsters lived here. There was the great kingdom of the Pabilsag Scorpionmen, the small genie nation of Sludern, and the religious group which venerated the clear light dragon as their chief deity. His faith was widespread among nomads, had its main shrine in this place. And at the edge of this desert was a gigantic tornado that came once every 30 years. It was thousands of meters across and immeasurably high. While there were some differences in the exact timing of its appearance, the tornado occurred in exactly the same place at almost exactly the same time. It was a remnant from a failed magical ritual by the great empire which had once existed here. The capital of this former empire protruded from beneath the sands. This phenomenon had been triggered by an incredibly powerful magic item known as the Scepter of the Sands. It had taken place after the Mishosu had been born and took to the skies. It was a gate leading to another world, and sucking everything out. There were many explanations along those lines, but everyone who had entered the tornado to try and unravel the mystery had never come back. Many people had gone to explore the location before the tornado had come, but they had found a perfectly normal location, with no sign that anything existed there. Since one could predict the day of the tornado's occurrence, many people planned to wait in the spot where the eye of the storm would be when it appeared. But as expected, they never came back. Others tried to enter it from the air, and they had disappeared too. Therefore, nobody had any idea why that tornado had appeared, or what was in its center. And then, at some point, watching that gigantic tornado from a distance had become an event that all the residents of the surrounding area participated in every 30 years. The storm lashed at his body. In places where walking was difficult like the desert, it was very difficult to resist strong winds that threw one off balance. A person could easily fall down if they got careless. If only I could use creation, who knows how much easier my path ahead could be. If he suppressed this desert tornado with creation, and there was some reason that the origin of this tornado was doing it, it was possible that things might end without the mystery being solved. The reason why Suzuki Satoru had come up with a dumb idea like that, which had been immediately rejected for the above reason, was because his current conditions were really that taxing for him. Suzuki Satoru shouted so he could be heard over the gales. He was joined to his two companions behind him by a mithril chain. He started by shouting to the one that he was most concerned for. "Kino, are you alright?" A voice that matched Suzuki Satoru's in volume came back at him. It belonged to the new Ainz Gown's second seat, Kino Fazhersenburn. "I'm fine." Although the girl's voice was strong, he could not help but think there would be problems. Take Kino and Satoru, for instance. Although Suzuki Satoru was nothing but bones, he was heavier compared to her. Therefore, it was more likely that Kino would get blown away. Of course, he had had Kino carry various things, as if to weigh her down. However, she would sink into the desert sands if she carried too much. "Kino, you should have waited in the inn after all. I'll send you back with the teleportation spell once we reach the objective." "Are you still saying that even after coming all this way?" Satoru Kino replied, as though she had nothing to say. "You know you want to complete the journey with your own 2 feet, right?" Suzuki Satoru smiled bitterly. This was an incident from when they were climbing a peak said to be one of the highest on this continent. While they had not managed to see the so-called Golden Summit, the memory of the conversation they had as they stood atop the apex of creation and looked down on everything was still clear in his mind. "Yes. Back then, we had a conversation like this too. I still remember we were saying that well caught up in an avalanche. Yeah. Pretty amazing, right? That incident had taken place halfway up the mountain. Well, using fly would have made things simple enough. It would have made things too boring, and so the two of them decided to use their superhuman strength to climb the rock face. Then, an avalanche which blanked out their vision had occurred. While cold damage did not harm either of them, the bludgeoning damage from the avalanche was still effective. Of course, they had expected something like that and cast defensive spells on themselves, but it had still left a deep impression. Even after being buried by the avalanche, their immunity to movement impediments meant that they had popped out of the snow at the same time, whereupon they had a good laugh. Powerful emotions were immediately suppressed due to the special qualities of the undead. As a turn to gentle good humor, Suzuki Satoru made that suggestion, and Kino had refused in a similar way. Just as he was narrowing his eyes, a nostalgia voice came from behind them. "It's surely that's where's me. Im shenvis. It's slickish to she that's too." The androgynous and very distinctive voice, though somewhat garbled, came from further behind Kino. Although Suzuki Satoru could not see it through the severe sandstorm, there ought to have been a heteromorph that looked like a lump of sand over there. He was the 4th seed of the new Ainz Gown, Nuru. He was a mutant offshoot of the Roper race, a hairdripper. Hairdrippers had a hive mind, but some were occasionally born that were not part of it. And he was one of them. When Suzuki Satoru, Kino, and Skria had found the hairdripper, it had indicated its desire to travel with them. Incidentally, it had no personal name, so Suzuki Satoru had named him Nurunuru. It was supposed to be a temporary name at first, but it had decided to use it. His, although he could have been a her voice, was made by two tentacles that were open at the end, called voice strands. Therefore, a lot of excess noise got into his voice in places like this. However, he had the special ability of being able to cast spells without verbal or somatic components, and to instantly cast them while standing stock still. It was truly mysterious. Haha. Nu, I have no idea what you're saying. That voice had come from inside Suzuki Satoru's cloak. Me too, Gue. The voice cut off halfway, probably because sand had gotten into his mouth. This was the 5th seed of the new Ainz gown, crystal of the native race. It was a race that was less than 20 centimeters long, with translucent wings that resembled those of fairies, but they looked more like insects. Their similarity to fairies was used to deceive and prey on fairies, because they were a carnivorous race. Although he did not think they were related to fairies, spells which only affected humanoids and demi-humans had no effect on them, and so he was considered a heteromorph and allowed to join. However, he was also immune to spells that should have been effective on heteromorphs, so Suzuki Satoru had always had his doubts about whether this was actually the case. Nurunuru was a psychic magic caster, while Crystal held a thief-type profession, namely that of assassin. He and Crystal had once clashed during a certain incident, but they became friends after yet another incident. Crystal, you'd be better off not talking. Still, has it been so long that you're feeling nostalgic for that time? It was about 40 years ago, right? Has it? It's been so long. Suzuki Satoru muttered to himself, and looked ahead. The tornado lashed at the sands and completely obscured his vision. Suzuki Satoru's undead body could see through darkness, but not through sandstorms. Kino was the same in that respect. Nurunuru had no eyes, but he could obtain information about his surroundings through sensing the vibrations around him. When you put it that way, we really have been to all kinds of places. Yes, we've been to. Kino's happy voice was suddenly cut off. Blah. The sand got into my mouth. Of course, Kino had put a mask on before entering this sandstorm. It was Suzuki Satoru's beloved mask of jealousy. Lending Kino a mask that she considered to be in bad taste was largely because he wanted to prank her. The reason why sand had gotten into Kino's mouth even with the mask on was probably because of the gap created when she spoke. Suzuki Satoru snickered to himself in a way that nobody could hear. However, she had still heard Suzuki Satoru laugh quietly amidst the savage sandstorm. Kino retorted in an unhappy tone. It's not fair, Satoru. It's not like sand gets into your mouth. Indeed, Gue. Crystal smiled bitterly to Kino as he answered her. No, there's still a strange feeling of something getting in there. Still, I should say it's hardly unpleasant, or should I say I don't mind at all. Su. Nu, I have no idea what you're saying. It's still unfair. If only I had a body like yours, Satoru. Isn't it fine like this? If you ask me, a body like yours is better, Kino. That way you don't get caught up in annoying things. That's because a fight breaks out the moment you show your face, Satoru. That was how things went when the undead were hated everywhere. Still, you draw a lot of trouble on your own too, Kino. Sometimes, Kino got into sticky situations when collecting information. This tended to be especially true in unsafe areas. That said, while she was the weakest member of the new Ainz gown, she was still much stronger than the average person, and she could easily take care of the average punk who thought he had some skills. The problem came in places with good security, because of the people who tried to take her in out of kindness. If they had ill intentions she could have settled it with violence, but it was very hard to deal with their goodwill. Heteromorphs who wanted to travel in peace occasionally faced such problems. It seems humanoids are always troublesome, and if we hide our true forms, people look at us with curious eyes. Humanoids' position in the big scheme of things was very low. It was because they were weak that they caused problems easily. As the two of them sighed, there was a dosy sound by his feet. Or rather, it was as done. Suzuki Satoru bent down and investigated the vicinity of the sound. He fished a rock out of the sand. No, it was a tapered stone that looked tougher than ordinary rock. It must have been blown here by the strong wind. Suzuki Satoru pricked up his ears. Shun. What are you say? Cough cough. Look out. It's not just one or two of them. There's a whole lot of stones headed our way. He could hear the sounds of countless objects cutting through the winds amidst the sound of the gale. It was very difficult to avoid those stones flying at them in a place with poor visibility like this. Perhaps they might have been safe if they were encased in extremely hard armor, but it was impossible to wear that sort of thing and walk around in the desert. This was definitely an attack which could annihilate any expedition. Everyone, defend yourselves as you advance. Kino, are you alright? There was no telling how long it would be before they would be able to pass through this, but since this was flying debris thrown up by the tornado, stopping here or making a shelter would be meaningless. I'm fine. Keep going. Shun. Kino replied in the affirmative. So did Nurunuru, or at least, that was what he thought. Nurunuru cast a defense spell on himself, while Kino used the power of the ultimate vampire, the One. After plundering all the research of Corpus of the Abyss, she had researched it and gained this power. However, it was a realm that was only supposed to be reachable by more powerful entities. Since she had attained it with a weak body, its potency was greatly reduced. In that case, she ought to be called a lesser one. If there were any difficulties, he was planning to lend her a magic item which rendered her immune to normal missiles, that is, ones that were not enchanted, but it would seem that was not necessary. Suzuki Satori's lung robe protected Crystal's body, and it kept him safe from everything except sand particles. Suzuki Satori himself was immune to all attacks below level 60. Satori. What's wrong, Kino? It's getting pretty interesting now, isn't it? She was not being ironic or making fun of her circumstances. She sounded like she was wholeheartedly enjoying this. That's right, Kino. Suzuki Satori felt the same way. It was this difficulty which made the two of them, no, the members of the new Ainz happy. Making friends and wandering the length and breadth of the world with them. Witnessing all manner of mysteries and going where no man had gone before. That was why they knew that overcoming these trials would only make their joy all the sweeter. Here we go. Don't get blown away. Yup. Yeah, gubs. The flying debris struck them over and over again, but none of them seemed to mind as they forged on ahead. Satori. Hold on. The spell seems like it's about to wear off. Kino. I'm counting on you. Okay. Kino took hold of the scroll in her bag and took it out, taking care not to let it get blown away. Mass Compass. This second-tier spell was a multi-target version of the first-tier spell Compass. This was the reason why these people could unerringly home in on their destination, the Eye of the Tornado. Thanks, Kino. Shun. You're welcome, Satori. From what I can tell, we're not far from our destination. Ah, got it. Each member of the new Ainz had their own share of responsibility.